where does demonic influence come into addictions and past hurts?
Okay. Now, obviously, I can't prove this, but I firmly believe that the demons of hell occupy our bitter roots.
You want to explain what a bitter root is?
In Hebrews 12:15, look, I'm looking diligently, lest anyone fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springs up, causing trouble, through which many are defiled. Bitter roots blocks our relationship with the Lord. Bitter roots causes us personal trouble like sexual addiction, drug addiction, narcissism, etc., etc. And thirdly, it destroys relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of marital therapy, as you have, Mike. And in every case, well, I better not say every case, and probably 99% of them, the root of the problem in the marriage was not caused during the marriage.
Right.
Goes back to bitter roots that were brought into the marriage.
So when we're talking about bitter roots, we're talking about hurts, wounds of the past, mental, emotional trauma.
Yeah. I think in the same thing, I think Paul talked about strongholds
Mm-hmm.
in Corinthians.
Right.
I think the same thing. I believe technically there's the same thing. I was reading in Leviticus while I was sitting up there in the doctor's office waiting. And it mentioned in there what we would call bitter roots and strongholds.
Mm-hmm.
And God said if anybody had, I forget the word used, but if anybody had this problem, that they were to offer certain sacrifices and sprinkle the blood on the altar.
Mm-hmm.
It's in that section, I think chapter 15, 16,
Mm-hmm.
in there where God's given the orders for the various
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices for the various problems. And right there it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was mentioned
Mm-hmm.
about behavior problems,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
they were all for sacrifices.
Right.
Yeah, I wish I needed.
Well,
I'm going to go back and research that.
And I believe that scripturally there is a basis for that, because we're told, like in the book of Ephesians, where Paul makes a statement, if you're angry with if you're angry, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Be angry and sin not. And then he makes a statement right after that, give no place to the devil. So I think you're right that the bitter roots, the hurts, the pains, the wounds, that they can become a doorway for the influence of the enemy into our lives. And that once those get healed and taken care of, then the enemy loses a place where he can be in control and guide and direct.
Yeah, you take sexual addictions. Forgive me, I'm on porn, but it's a good example.
Yeah.
Listen, folks, structurally, all of our emotional behavioral problems are basically the same. They're created the same and they're fixed the same. But back to my point. You take pornography.
Mm-hmm.
A person, after what? Need for oxygen and water and food. The next strongest drive is sex.
Mm-hmm.
Would that not be a correct statement?
Right.
As everybody knows, it's a very powerful drive for procreation, for extension of of the species.
Mm-hmm.
We there has to be sex.
Mm-hmm.
So you get bitter roots connected to the normal sexual drive.
Mm-hmm.
And Satan has a heyday. He ruins that person's life. He's married, and his wife discovers he's looking at porn. She says, "Why am I not enough?" He's looking at a 2D picture.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's no physical touch.
Right.
And here he is masturbating, and he's neglecting me. And she feels like I've had wives to actually tell me that I'd rather he'd had an affair with another woman.
Mm-hmm.
I just, they don't understand it. And it's
It's painful.
many marriages end up divorced. Many children grow up in a one-parent home or foster home because of that bitter root.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me Satan's not in there?
Right.
Oh, he's having a heyday.
Right. Exactly. And
in the sermon.
And I think where this is concerned, I think this is a problem sometimes in the church, is that they'll look at something like that, and what people will often try to do is cast it out. And I have a new Facebook friend, Natalie Olson, that I told you about, Bob, and she works with people. And I was listening to a broadcast she was doing one time, and she made a statement that I loved. She said, "You cannot cast out a wound." And I thought, that is cool. I'm going to remember that. You cannot cast out a wound. And she was talking about that a lot of times people come with problems, like with what we have seen with pornography, and people will try to boil it down to, well, it's a spirit, just cast it out. And we do believe that there are spirits involved. So we're not saying that's not true. We believe biblically that is true. However, it's not as simple as just saying, well, I cast you out, because that wound is still there. And that wound is what opens the door for the influence. Heal the wound, you close the door.
I've witnessed. I had one lady, dignified first church lady, got her bitter root to Jesus. It was not being good enough for Mama. That lady got down on all fours. And I heard sounds, bawling. Something was going on. And I've had it happen several times. And I actually believe it's exorcism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember you telling that story. Did you tell me one time I don't know if it's the same lady or not, you were working with somebody one time and a different voice came out of her?
Oh, yeah, this is a different lady.
Okay.
She was laying on the couch. And, that real deep, guttural voice started talking to me. It was like a male voice, like a bass male voice.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
So, folks, we do believe.
Lord, what have I got into?
We do believe that there are some forces out there that are beyond what we see in the natural realm. And I think that's when the Bible tells us we need gifts like this, the discerning of spirits, to be able to make that distinction. But I'm always telling, like, people that I work with, counselors, therapists, coaches, who are Christians, be very careful about just immediately going to, we need to cast it out. That you really got to have the discernment for that. Because, Bob, in our experience, a lot of times that is not the problem. I've had people come to me say, well, I was told I had a spirit. And I was like, no, you don't have a spirit. They're like, I don't. I said, no, you're walking in the flesh, but you don't have a spirit. And we need to renew your mind, but you don't have a spirit.
Mike, on this subject, when I first, as a pastor, I'd been pastoring probably 10 or 12 years. And I stood up before the church. I honestly thought a chance that I'd be fired for a statement I was going to make. And I simply said, I was talking about bitter roots and pains, And I said, for a lot of people in the church, preaching is not enough.
Right.
And I've said that in 3 different churches. And I've never had an objection.
You're right.
Verbalized to me or anybody who could have told me.
Right. And you believe it. And Bob, for many years, you were a preacher.
Yeah, 44 years.
Yeah, until you retired recently. But you had I spoke at your church a couple of times. So I know you believe in preaching, but it's like you said, there's something else. This is what we're talking about before. There is a wisdom that was needed.